Welcome to Sober Solutions. We are a weekly recovery podcast not affiliated with any particular 12-step or recovery program. However, you may hear us mention them. My name is Jason, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
And welcome back to Sober Solutions podcast. Tonight is episode 10. Tonight is number 2 of our 3-part series on relationships. We're going to dive into relationships of self, talking about our own personal journeys of self-discovery, self-love, and self-awareness. And Ben, why don't you kick us off tonight?
Gentlemen, wonderful to see you this evening. The interesting thing that I found was that once I removed alcohol, my life was still unmanageable. And that's not something I was ready for. I was ready to be done drinking. I was ready to be done physically feeling awful. I was ready to stop hating the person that I was. But I got out of rehab, and that first week out of rehab where I wasn't working a program and I was just trying to do it on my own, I was still an absolute emotional disaster. And there's been a lot of things that have helped me. Yeah, the programs helped me, therapies helped me, a fellowship has helped me, but there's been a lot that goes into it, and it really has been a slow process. I came out of rehab feeling physically great. I lost a ton of weight. I was working out, and I had a confidence about myself that I hadn't had before. But mentally and emotionally, there was still a lot of shit that I had to deal with. And when I got out of rehab, I moved back home to my parents' house, and me and my mom spent a lot of mornings talking. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot. I mean, probably for those first 2 weeks, me and my parents, like by like 9:30, we were all ready for bed, because just the emotional toll of going through 10 years of addiction, and again, addiction that didn't really affect them up front. My addiction didn't exhibit itself in outward ways, but it was the time that was the time that I started to sift through that wreckage. And it's only been recently that I've really understood what that what sifting through the wreckage actually looks like. And so somebody in rehab, I think I forget the name of the book, and it was about the idea of pain versus suffering. And I've felt a lot of pain. I've put myself through a lot of pain. I've put other people through a lot of pain. But suffering comes from when I sit in that pain and I don't deal with it. And so for me, and this is a long journey, because I would like to stay sober for the rest of my life, and I can do that one day at a time, but everything doesn't get fixed in a day. We've talked about that on other episodes. Walk 10 miles into the woods and it's going to take you 10 miles to get out. But there's just a peace of mind that I have now, that I have many different outlets to deal with the many different issues that I have. And these character defaults, they still pop up even when I'm trying my best. I'm not trying to do these things like manipulation, deception, self-seeking. It's not this outward, I want to drink, so I'm going to go ahead and get alcohol and I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to no, it's those things. That part doesn't exist anymore. But addiction by nature is a selfish disease, and it makes me focus on myself. And so those things still exist, whether it's me being in a relationship, or me being a father, me being an ex-husband, me being a son or a brother or a friend. It's really a matter of, I have to check my motives now, and that helps me better connect with myself, which is, it's not something that I really understood before this, but I kind of just went along for the ride, and I allowed myself to take myself wherever I was going to go. And I try not to do that anymore because I never put myself in a good situation. Even when I was doing the good things, even when I had, a house and a job and kids and cars and a pool and all of the good stuff, I was not putting myself in a good situation to be the best person, to live up to the ideal that I want to live up to. And so it's a long process. It's a lot of work, but it's not work that I'm not capable of. I mean, I was capable of a lot in addiction. I'm capable of a lot in recovery too.
Yeah, I liked what you were talking about pain and pain and suffering. I've heard the phrase, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I don't know if this is the actual quote, but I remember someone somewhere saying something like, "Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional."
Hmm.
And what you were just talking about is sitting in that suffering, and at least for me, that suffering was the most comfortable space to sit in because I was feeling something, whether that be, anger or shame or guilt, those bad, quote unquote, bad emotions. I was just sitting there because I was feeling something, and that's what I was missing. And now that I'm sober, I have all these other emotions and I work through that pain, and I don't suffer, because I don't allow myself to suffer. So, Chris, what do you think about this whole topic of self-discovery, self-awareness?
Yeah, I think it's funny how when you're in active addiction, your mind can manipulate you to think basically whatever the opposite of the truth is. I mean, when I was using, I thought that I had so many friends, that my friends were truly there. I thought that my wife loved me more than anything. I had this high amount of ego. I had this pride, but deep down, it was the opposite. And I as well was suffering. And honestly, I think if I truly look back, I felt like at the time I deserved it. And like you said, Jason, I was comfortable in that misery. And through this process of finding yourself and discovering who you truly are, I mean, Ben, you hit it on the head. Uh, Through recovery, it doesn't mean that, everything is peachy every day. However, you're able to actually feel feelings and work through them in a healthy manner. So I think recently I'm really focusing on letting go of shame. Um, Someone made a great analogy in a meeting the other day about rear view mirrors and the fact that they keep you safe in a car. You should look in the rear view mirror to know your surroundings, to be safe. But if you stare in the rear view mirror, you're then going to get into an accident.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to build my self esteem through esteemable acts. I'm trying to read a lot. In another sense, I'm trying new activities. You know, I stopped a lot of things that I enjoyed in life because I was using. And once again, I don't know if it's because I deserved it or not, but I was just sitting in that state of suffering. So, through hiking and mindfulness, yoga, fitness, a lot of golf, I think I'm finding myself again. And not only myself, but the people around me can see it. I'm getting a lot of calls recently to help them. For a period of years, no one would reach out to me for help because I wasn't reliable. I was flaky. I would, maybe I would show up, but I was never present. And lately, I'm trying to be present. I am able to be present, and it's a roller coaster. I think the worst day of being sober by far is better than the best day in active addiction. So
Yeah,
I
that's
totally agree with
absolutely that's absolutely the case. And there's two things that you said there that really struck me. The first is that trying new things and kind of rediscovering yourself. One of the things that I love to do is woodworking, and
you're
I
very good
literally
at it.
why
You're
thank
very
you.
good at it.
I
Yeah.
You're
appreciate
both
that.
really good at it.
It's one of those things that I really enjoyed the entire process of working with a client and designing a piece and executing that vision, and it was really something I truly enjoyed. But my drinking habits wouldn't allow that, because you can't work with saws and drills when you're putting away 12 to 15 a day,
I mean, you
it's just
could, but
you could, but
Definitely
not
not safe.
recommended.
right. Thankfully, I have all 10
Public
fingers.
disclaimer. Yeah.
Yes,
Right,
please don't
yes.
try that at home.
Yeah, exactly. And so, unfortunately, I got divorced and moved out of the house, and the wood shop that I had doesn't exist in the way that I wanted to anymore. And it's actually something I've been working through with my therapist, because I don't have those creative outlets that I once had. And so it's working my way back to finding things that I really enjoy doing. Hiking, something I never did before, and now I am, I'm a hiking, well, not aficionado, because that I say that, and then I'm not here 3 episodes later because I'm lost in the woods. But that's absolutely one of the things that really just absolutely is so true about rediscovering yourself. And it's and the other thing you talked about was feels like one of the gifts of this is to be relied upon, and in this, the way you're talking about it is, people reaching out to you for help. There's somebody in my network that's going through some marital issues, and unbeknownst to me, I've been able to be there for them and and share my experience of what that's like, and help them in a way I never imagined that I would be able to assist somebody in a healthy way, and not in just yeah, I know what you're going through, divorce sucks, but to really help them figure out how to navigate it and figure out if they're making the right decision, because it is a very confusing process, and it's just not something that I could have ever done in any way, shape, or form if I was still under the influence.
So what's really interesting that we're talking about this tonight is, as you guys know, I'm back in school. I'm getting my second master's degree in clinical psychology, with a focus in clinical mental health counseling and substance abuse disorders. And the class that I'm currently taking, we just started talking about this topic: self-discovery, self-awareness, self-love, self-care. And there's this handbook that we're using that was actually created by one of the students, by one of the grad students that's in her final year. And what she did was she created this self-care wheel. And I don't know if this was taken off of, another model or not, but um, it really talks about these different aspects of self-care: the physical, the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual, the personal, and the professional. And I don't know about you guys, but at least half of these I didn't think about when I would talk about self-care. I mean, just the professional side of things: putting up boundaries to take a lunch, putting up boundaries not to work on the weekends, things like not check your emails when it's not working hours. I'm terrible at that. And, through the course, that's actually something that I'm committed to, is that area of self-care, because what's going through my head even today is, if I don't do that, I'm a bad employee. Because what's being pushed up against me is this idea that you were such a failure before, Jason, that you drank on the job, drugged on the job, missed work, did these other things, that I want to prove myself at this job. And part of me wants to prove myself at this job by not taking lunch, by having meetings from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., by working on the weekends, And so what I'm doing is actually an old behavior of mine. I'm putting something else in front of myself. So I'm putting my job in front of my own needs, because my own needs are to go to the gym, to have friends and go out to dinners with them, to sleep at least 8 hours a night. And that wasn't happening over the last 2 weeks because I was putting this job, which I do love and I'm getting in the groove of, but I'm putting all of that in front of my own self-care. And it was very eye-opening for me when we had class this week.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this a bunch of times, but you have to put your sobriety, or, we could say self care. And I think our sobriety is part of our self care first in order to be there for every other aspect of life, right? So I agree with you, Jason. I have had a hard time managing the process of, one thing we did in IOP was we were given, I think it was 20 Nerf balls, and we had buckets. And there was your family bucket, there was your physical bucket, there was your professional bucket, there was all these buckets. And you had to there was sobriety, recovery, and you had to put as the Nerf balls and where you're going to focus all of your effort. And according to the therapist, we all failed. But everyone would put like 3 in recovery, 4 in your family, 2 in physical, and you had all these things. And really, the end goal was to emphasize the fact that without sobriety, without taking care of yourself, all that other stuff is just going to go by the wayside. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be in a week, but eventually, if you're not staying sober, you're going to lose that job, family, your relationship, your physical attributes, all that stuff. So I definitely kind of was on your boat for a while, and I still am. I struggle with how to prioritize my time, and I think more and more I'm focusing on incorporating recovery into each aspect. So I might not go to a meeting every day, but I drive a lot for work, and I'm able to go to Zoom meetings or listen to recovery podcasts, other ones, or talk to my network. And I make sure that each day that is incorporated in my life so that I can be there for my job. I can be there for my family. I can be there to go to the gym.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I heard in rehab was that, if you don't put recovery first, everything behind it isn't going to exist anyway. And it's true. And so I, kind of dove head first after that first week, and I got into the rooms and I started working a program. I went, overboard, just diving into the program, which was confusing at first because I wasn't sure what that was supposed to look like. Is it just supposed to be disregard everything else? And so I kind of went for the almost the opposite end where, I was making as many meetings as possible and it's and trying to be there for others and taking phone calls. And it was a learning experience because this is, again, for me, it's a lifetime journey. And yes, I'm going to have to be in recovery, or I'm not going to have to be in recovery. I get a chance to recover, for the rest of my life, but all of my other responsibilities will still exist. And so it has become this idea where the second that I forget that I have a problem with alcohol or that I have a problem with addiction, and I start to focus on those other things, that I open myself up to slipping. So then it becomes, what do I do for myself? And like you say, Chris, and it's interesting because we're wired differently. I don't have the self-control to just put a recovery podcast on. So for me, I have to be in my morning meeting every day. I have to be, so that whether I'm working or not, I throw my earbud in. If I'm home, I participate as much as possible, because for me, I'm getting that automatic dose of what I need to start that day, and then I can, build on all of those other things. And so I think that's probably the most important thing, is that you need to experiment with what works. I don't think we had any problem experimenting, when we were not in recovery. There's nothing wrong with experimenting to find what's going to, feed our souls now.
It's so true. To that point, I was so selfish in my addiction that I would do whatever it took to get drunk, get high, get whatever. And now when I need to do whatever it takes to feed my soul and take care of myself, my first reaction is to not do it. I heard recently, and this was actually in class, um, the analogy of, and you both would understand this because you have kids, but if you're on an airplane, you put it on yourself, not someone else that you're with, right? Because if you're not getting the oxygen, you're going to pass out. And then how can you help someone else? I always used to wear this as a badge of honor, that I would give the shirt off my back. I would give the last dollar in my pocket to someone, but that just left me broke and cold. So there's that fine line and that balance that I think, where you can still be giving of others while giving to yourself, because service does fuel who I am. When I got out of rehab, I knew who I was because I did the work during those 28 days to take off all of that armor that I had on, all of that protective gear, all of those different identities that I had on. I took all of that off and I was stripped to the core. I did not know who I was, and it took 28 days for me. And still, I think to today, I'm still learning who I am, but I found my foundational core of who I was by asking other people how they did it. I remember I was sitting in one of the group therapy sessions and I asked the room of guys, I said, how do you love yourself? And at first, I was afraid to ask the question because I thought I was all the heads were going to turn and they were going to look at me like I was stupid. But the reaction that I got was, "Wow, that's a really good question," because I don't know how to do that yet either.
No, I mean, not to add another analogy, but I actually was talking to my wife about this the other day, and I forget what it was, but I made up 17 excuses under the sun of why I couldn't go to my meeting on Sunday. And, I was helping her, I was doing the dishes, I was putting the kids down, and she literally said
Phil
to
was
me,
leading.
yeah, well, that too. Speaking of golf, this is what she said to me. She goes, Chris, I've never seen you not wake up at 3 in the morning, drive 4 hours, do whatever you have to do to get to a golf course. There is nothing that in this world that will stop you if you want to golf. And she's like, I personally want to see that in your recovery. And although I got a little frustrated when she said that, I mean, she's 100% accurate. Like, I don't have that commitment and I need to get there, you know, because I don't want to lose what I have right now and what I've built. And Jason, you were mentioning ways to how to find out how to love yourself in ways. So, I mean, maybe we can all circle around and say, I was just thinking of how to do that. So like
That's a good question.
what did those old timers say? Or Ben, I mean, you've been to a ton of meetings. So I mean, the one thing that I'm recently trying to do is be self-aware of what makes me feel good. And I'm not talking about, a round of golf. I'm talking about what truly makes me feel like I did something esteemable that day. And it's hard to sometimes have that self awareness because we're just in this fast paced moving life, and to actually slow down and recognize that. And when I do now recognize something that makes me feel good and esteemable, I try to repeat it. I volunteer once a month at our church, and it's a food pantry. And that makes me feel good. And it's 2 hours out of my month. But I've been doing that now for, I think, basically since I got back from rehab. So whatever that is, 8 months. So what are some other ways that you can find out how to love yourself and build up your esteem?
One of the things that you just said there was, yeah, it's self-awareness, but there's also for me that a level of altruism where I have to not only do these acts, but I have to do them, making sure that nobody's watching, or not making sure that nobody's watching, but not caring if anybody's watching and not seeking to see if anybody does it. And one of the very simplest things that I've ever heard in a meeting was, are you the kind of guy that puts the shopping cart back when you're done loading your groceries? And
Oh, that's
it
good.
sticks with me every time I'm I'm at shop right now.
Now I feel bad about myself.
There goes
but
your
it's-
esteemable act.
Yeah.
But it's just so true, because now the guy, the kid that's working pushing the carts around in the rain, now he's got one less cart that he doesn't have to go for. And it's just a little thing that, again, it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just that we don't consider a lot of other things outside of ourselves or our families or the things that we think are important. And somebody said it in a meeting today, you never know what a smile is going to do for somebody. You never know how that's going to change somebody's day. And so just that's what I found. It's the little tiny things.
Yeah, I know. Ben, I totally agree with you. And I think that is an esteemable act that you can consider for yourself. And that's doing something for someone else. Matrix actually put something into the chat here. You can buy someone a cup of coffee behind you in the drive-thru, paying it forward. I think that is an excellent, esteemable act, and especially if they don't know that you did that and you're already gone out of the coffee shop by the time that they have to pay. I had to figure out what I could do for myself because it was such a foreign concept. So things like getting a pedicure, getting a massage, doing things like that doesn't actually impact anyone else, except downstream it does, right? Because if I go to the gym, if I go lay on the beach, if I get a massage, that's something that's for me and only me. The downstream advantage of that is that I'm a much happier person. And I'm not a bastard walking around the streets, snarling at old ladies. And so I think that is a great point you had. And the big question is, what can we do for ourselves? I think you guys have alluded to it, the woodworking, the golfing, things like that. And that's the big question, at least it is for me.
Finding those activities that bring us joy. I love doing those. I love finding new things. I think the harder thing for me is kind of the spiritual or emotional side. I mean, we just talked about this little spiff that we all had yesterday. And in active addiction, I don't think I would have talked to you guys for about a month. I would have said
I would have cut you off.
Yeah, I would have cut you guys off. And to the listeners, we basically got in an argument, a disagreement about an editing thing. And in the past, I wouldn't have talked to you. I would have been off this podcast. I would have told everyone that you guys are the worst people ever. And that would have been it, But I think that I'm trying to live more empathetic. I think I'm trying to not hold on to resentments. And I'm really trying to put myself in other people's shoes. I'm not perfect. Yesterday, I was upset, And in my head, I probably did say half those things. But I made a point today, and I woke up today not feeling great because I had those thoughts yesterday. So I woke up today, and I read the Just for Today. I went to a meeting. I talked to a bunch of people, not specifically about this, but just talked to a bunch of people. And after we talked for about 5 minutes today, we're all friends again. And I think that's a big difference in how I'm living my life, is letting go, apologizing, not expecting apology in return. You know, I do apologize for my role in situations. And I'm not doing that just to hear a reciprocated apology. I'm trying to live a more, and most importantly, I have empathy for other people. And I think that's where the emotional side is helping.
Holding on to resentment is what kills my program. You know, that I
Absolutely.
it's a physical feeling now for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Waking up and having this resentment of that conversation yesterday, I was like dragging. I was dragging today. And then I worked through it, and now I feel great.
Yeah, I was dreading this recording tonight because I was like, God, we got to deal with this. Damn it. But one of the things that my program has taught me, somebody said in the room, they said, this program is meant to keep you sober, to teach you how to act like an adult. That's it. That's really it. And I need to be taught how to act like an adult because I still ask the question, am I really an alcoholic? Well, the fact that I can ask that question means that I am. So I need guidance about how to live like a normal human being. And that comes through a lot of different ways. It comes from people in the program, it comes from people outside the program. Chris, you said something that really hit home to me when you said about what your wife brought up about golfing, and you were annoyed about it at first because the truth hurts. My ex-wife the other day texted me and it was basically this long thing about how she would like to see me make more of an effort with my daughters. And it was like, are you kidding me? Like, I was, I, I didn't even know I had an alcohol problem in July. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know it was to the extent that it was. I went to rehab. I came home and I never got to go back. And you're upset? And it was like, whoa, wait a second. You know why you're getting so defensive? It's because it's the truth, and that you do need to make more of an effort. And so acknowledging that to her, we had probably one of the best conversations that we've ever had yesterday. And it's because the resentment can't exist. If I allow the resentment to exist, it eventually will consume me. And I just don't want to live like that anymore. I don't like when, if we have a disagreement or something, and it gets emotional, it's like I don't want to live in that space where I don't want to live in that negative space anymore. And it's not just about ignoring it, and it's not just about cutting it off. It's about addressing it and looking at what was my role in it. What did I do? What could I have done better? And then the next time that comes along, next time there's an edit I don't agree with, instead of being snarky in a text message, I can say, would you mind just letting me know what your thought process is behind that? And that right there, because if that happened, I feel like we would have gotten to a solution much sooner. And it's just something that it's a little tiny thing. And guess what? As long as we keep making episodes, there's probably going to be other edits that we disagree with. And now we have a way to deal with them. And so everything for me now is a learning experience.
Yeah, it's about growth, and I think that's a major part of the self-discovery, self-awareness journey. Is my philosophy tends to be, if I'm not growing, I'm dying. And I think that's a big part of it. It's interesting, I've been sitting here for the last couple minutes thinking about one thing. So I was interviewed on another podcast earlier today, the Real Fitness Family, and hopefully we get Eric on the show to talk about fitness, health, and wellness. But he asked me this question right out of the gate. So, who are you?
Oh, man.
And right? The funny thing is that I had an answer. I had an answer for him because I've been working on that specific question since I walked into the doors at Rehab.
Mhm.
And today I can say I know who I am and I love who I am.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is the biggest growth that I've had in my entire life.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
imagine asking yourself, or even just saying, you know what, say out loud, I love myself a year ago.
No, I couldn't.
Right.
Nope.
I think that 99% of the people that walked into rehab, they couldn't repeat those words.
No.
And if they did, they were probably lying to themselves.
Yeah. The last 2 years of my addiction, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Physically couldn't. And when I would try to force myself, I would get angry because I just hated that bastard. I just hated him. And I don't hate him today. I feel bad for him, but I don't hate him because that's just a part of my story. And, just going back to something you guys said about rehab, when the work that I started doing rehab, they always would say, when you did your daily journal, it was like, all right, well, what step are you working on? And it was like, all right, you're working on 1 through 3. I look back now, I wasn't working on any of those steps because I had no idea what they meant. What I was working on was honesty, openness, and willingness. I had to get honest with myself about what the problems were. I had to be open to what the solutions might be, and I had to be willing to execute those solutions. And even walking out of rehab, I wasn't open and I wasn't willing because it took me a week to get into a room. And now it's not like that. Now it's so much easier. It's a second nature to take honesty, openness, and willingness when I'm confronted with something and just start working backwards. Am I being honest about the situation? Have I checked my motives? Am I open to what everybody else has to say about the matter? And am I willing to make the adjustments that are suggested to me? And that goes for any aspect of my life. And that's not something that I ever had. So yeah, it's about the work, and that work can look a lot of different ways.
It's funny about circling back to the loving thyself, the documentary about Chris Herron, who's a basketball player. He played for the Celtics, played internationally, lived in Massachusetts, but he had a huge heroin addiction, alcoholic, the whole 9 yards. And he said that for 10 years, I think, that he never shaved in a mirror because he couldn't even look himself in the mirror. And that even after he got clean and sober, it took a few years to start actually shaving in front of the mirror. And now he's like, I can actually look in the mirror and love who's looking back. And that just hit home. I mean, it takes a lot of work after active addiction to start loving yourself. And everything that we talk about tonight, whether it's finding your activities or it's reading or it's the physical, emotional, spiritual, it's all about loving the person that's looking back at you in the mirror.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll add to that is it is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be every day. I think that just like my recovery, I have to work at it every day. Otherwise, I slip backwards. Well, boys, I think this was a great episode.
Indeed.
I think it was very revealing, and I think that we had so much to talk about because we have been working on this journey of self-discovery and self-awareness and self-love. So kudos to you both. And as always, tonight's episode is dedicated to the still sick and suffering alcoholic and addict, especially the individual who will pick up for the first time tonight. Have a great night, boys.
Have a great night.
Have a great one.
We appreciate your liking and subscribing to our podcast. If you liked what you heard today and would like to support our podcast, feel free to Venmo $1 to our virtual basket at Sober Solutions Podcast. We want to hear from you too. If you have a comment, question, topic, or would like to come on the show, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Sober Solutions Podcast. Or you can shoot us an email to sobersolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show.